is why we fell in love with Latisha and what she's doing over there. So please officially welcome Latisha. She has so much to share with you guys.
Thank you. Am I on? All right, thank you. I'm not used to being shoved over in the corner, so I might have to come out every once in a while. But thank you so much, Carl, for this invitation. We're excited to be here. My scholars are excited to be here, and every opportunity that you've given us. But I want to start today with the why. It's one of life's greatest joys to wake up in the morning and know why that day exists, or what the purpose of that day is, and in fact, why any day matters. Well, for me, my why begins with a story. And so I would like to introduce you today. Is my mic not going to work either? Can I not move? Okay, I'm going to be pinned in the corner. Okay, test, 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 test. Okay, we'll see. I might have to rip the mic off, but we'll see. So every why begins with a story. And I would like to introduce you today to second grade Latisha. That toothy, mischievous grin says it all. My mother would sum up this little girl in one word: ornery. And I was definitely ornery. I was hyper, I was full of energy. I had a really hard time paying attention in class. And I remember every year on my report cards it said, "Latisha talks too much." And one particular time my mother recalls, I had drawings on my papers, and my mother said, "When do you have time to draw all these hearts and butterflies and flowers?" And I looked at her and I said, "When the teacher's talking about all that unimportant stuff." So that's second grade Latisha. And second grade Latisha turned into third grade Latisha. And third grade Latisha really started to struggle in school. I was having such a hard time paying attention that I was missing most of my academic day. And by the end of third grade, I could barely read. My mother decided that she didn't want me to go to fourth grade when I couldn't read, so she marched herself up to the school and demanded that I be held back in third grade. The teachers and the principals told her no, and so she took another meeting and meeting after meeting until she got her way. Now, the school counselor was very surprised. She said, "Latisha's IQ is average than the other children in her room. It's above average. So her problem is not, is she smart enough, but it's if we can get the material interesting enough for her to pay attention." And so, as you can see, I struggled in school. It was hard. The academic gaps were huge. And that's why this work is so important. It's why every staff member at Beta Academy shows up and gives of themselves every day. And it's why we have fun and engaging classrooms. We do it for little girls like her. And we do it for every boy and girl out there that's like her. We do it for them, our scholars. And we do it for students like Teddy. And you heard his story. Before I was a tuition-free charter school, I started out as a private school. And it was very difficult for families in our neighborhood to pay for tuition. And we tried everything that we could to keep the tuition rates low. But families like Teddy, you heard their story. They had to sell a car to pay tuition, and they'd wake up early with their 3 little kids, drop off her husband at work, and they would come and sleep in the parking lot until the school doors open. So for us to have a charter school, it was a huge financial impact on Teddy's family. We do it for scholars like Diego. When Diego Moya enrolled in Beta Academy, he was in the 8th grade. He was 2 grade levels behind academically. In the first quarter, he had an average of a 35 in math and a 53 in reading. Diego says that coming to Beta was a hard transition because of the rigorous standards and high expectations. His mother wanted to withdraw him and take him to a school that was less challenging. But Diego didn't want to leave. He stayed at Beta and he persevered. Not only did he make strides, but he began to thrive. Right here is a sample of his STAR scores, and if you know how to read them, then go ahead. If you don't, I'll explain it to you. He scored in the 98th percentile master's level in reading and the 79th percentile in math. If you can look at the growth, it's indicated on the right side in both reading and math. He made accelerated progress, and he just keeps climbing. We do it for Elijah because his parents were concerned about the influence of low-performing schools on his academics, motivation, and future success. His mother homeschooled him for most of his elementary career, but his father was laid off, and so his mother had to return to work, and they began seeking a high-performing school for Elijah. When he enrolled in Beta Academy in the 5th grade, he was behind academically and had almost no confidence. He struggled to socialize with his peers, and he tried to hide in the back of the classroom. But you can't hide at Beta. And his teachers started encouraging him to believe in himself. And it didn't take long for Elijah to learn the skills that he needed to flourish. He went from insecure to confident. And last year at the spring dance, he rocked an electric blue suit and danced with every single girl. That's why we do it. We do it for Elijahs. We do it for the Diegos. We do it for the Teddys. We do it for people who don't have access to an elite education. And so our vision is very clear. It's an elite education for all children. We want every single child to have access to a great quality education. It's what our kids deserve in America. Our mission is to establish world-class schools through a culture of joyful rigor and develop scholars and leaders who can contribute on a community, national, and international level. Now, when I read this mission to our parents at our parent interest meetings, we have families that come and they want to know about this school, and am I interested? Do I want to enroll my scholar? And I tell them that the mission is very important, and we look at our mission almost for every single decision that we make in the school day. And so we'll get into the joy and the rigor part, and I'll break that down, what that looks like inside of Beta Academy. But also it's important that we raise scholars who know how to contribute. We live in a world and a society where it's all about me and what can you give me and what am I going to benefit out of this, and a scarcity mentality. And we want to teach our scholars how to be contributors. And we also want to teach our scholars how to compete internationally. You know, a lot of times it's very easy for schools, even like myself or a school down the street, to say, oh, well, I'm better than this school across the road, or hey, we're the best school in the neighborhood. But we have to start paying attention internationally. And if you're a business owner in this room and you've been a leader in this room, you know that other countries are coming in and they're buying up our businesses and they're being the leaders, and now we're serving other people and we don't have a seat at the table anymore. We want our scholars to have a seat at the table and be world changers. It's very important to us. One of the things that really inspired a lot of the decisions that we built was this book. We got a hold of this book. It's called The Smartest Kids in the World and How They Got That Way. And I recommend everybody in the room to read it. It's really incredible. But Amanda Ripley wanted to know why other countries were doing such a fabulous job and what was going on with American schools and American kids and why we were struggling and why we were behind. And so again, I have these parent meetings where I like to tell people about the school, and I do try to scare the parents. I'm like, this school is really hard and you have to buckle up, and if your kids are going to be enrolled here, you need to know right now your kids have a job, and that job is their education. And a lot of that is because other countries know that. Other countries know that the most important and the most valuable thing is education, but somewhere in America we've missed it. And so I take the time, I have this paper, I'll pull it out right now. I won't read you all of the quotes, but if you or my family is interested in the school, I would take the time. But I would like to read you a couple of my favorite quotes out of this book. But Amanda Ripley says, I've been looking around the world for clues as to what other countries were doing right. But the important distinctions were not about spending or local control or curriculum. None of that mattered very much. The education superpowers believed in rigor. People in these countries agreed on the purpose of school. School existed to help students master complex academic material. Other things mattered too, but nothing mattered as much. The most important thing in countries that are excelling like Japan and Korea and Finland and Poland, it's that the most important thing is education, and it's more precious to them than gold or oil. So Koreans understood that mastering difficult academic content was important. They didn't take shortcuts, especially in math. And they assumed that performance was mostly a product of hard work, not God-given talent. This is really important because in America, well, not everyone is equal, and you may be a little bit smarter. I'm not really sure about you. We're going to put you in the corner and maybe give you some worksheets. That looks like a typical American classroom. That's not what it looks like in other countries. They believe that it's a product of hard work. And I have to tell you, I have a sister that was labeled special education. And you know what my parents did? Okay, great, you've got a label, now you have to try twice as hard. Because it's easier for her, that just means it's harder for you. But you still got to get there. You're going to graduate with the same kids. You're going to be competing in the same workforce. So I had a special education sister that wasn't allowed to sit in the back of the classroom because I had one of those mamas. And she'd come up and make sure that my sister was given double the amount of work. And right now, she's our chief academic officer and has a master's degree in international business. That is the power of having a changed mentality. And go mama. Very interesting in this book, it says also, talking about Americans, very interesting. They suspected that children learned best through undirected free play, and that a child's psyche was sensitive and fragile. So during the 1980s and 1990s, American parents and teachers had been bombarded by claims that children's self-esteem needed to be protected from competition and reality in order for them to succeed. Despite a lack of evidence, the self-esteem movement took a hold in the United States in a way that it did not in most of the world. And they did this study, and the book talks about how they would ask principals, who are the most involved people in your school? And they would point to PTA parents. Well, when they would look at PTA parents, they would grab their kids' scores, and most of the PTA parents had students who scored worse in reading. If you were highly involved in the school, your kids were doing poor academically. Why? Because we show up to football games with full hearts and lawn chairs, and we celebrate for football games, and we pass out trophies to every single player, even if they were benched the whole time. They all get a trophy. And then we don't show up to demand, hey, my kid needs more rigorous math. Hey, they're behind in reading. I've got a neighbor next door that's reading better than my kid. No, that's not what American parents do. And so, in a way, to fix the education crisis, you have to get into the hearts and the minds of the parents and show them that this is important. It's more important than football. It's more important than sports. Beta Academy does now offer a sports program, and we have volleyball and soccer and other sports. But when we first started Beta Academy, I told the families that it was not a priority and that they would not get sports at Beta Academy. That 100% we were going to focus on the academics until our academics were where they should be on a world stage. Then we didn't have any business paying attention to any kind of athletics. And so we started Beta Academy in our first year, not offering any kind of athletics to the students besides their PE program, because we were on a mission to make sure that our students could compete in a global economy. Last quote I'll give you right here. One thing was clear. To give our kids the kind of education they deserved, we had to first agree that rigor mattered, most of all. That school existed to help kids learn to think, to work hard, and yes, sometimes to fail. Because if they learn how to fail, they learn how to have grit and overcome. That was the core consensus that made everything else possible. You can see right here, this is actually, it's a little bit pixelated, but this is a graph from the book. And they started doing this test called the PISA. And they wanted to see how we were performing against other countries, and other countries wanted to see. And so they get together this test in the 1960s to say, okay, where are all of our countries performing? And at the very beginning, and actually just a few years ago, the United States actually ranked 36th out of 39 developed countries. 36 out of 39 developed countries. Do you know what we rank number 1 in? Self-confidence. It's unbelievable. We think we're awesome, and yet everyone else is taking over the world, and we're just sitting by letting it happen. So let me show you right here. When this first happened, you can see Finland. This blue line, they're right at the top if you follow them down to the 1960s. They started out pretty low. Korea at the top, they started out a little bit lower. Japan was, a little bit lower. Now look at the United States. We're way down here on the orange. So we get the results. Now, the United States is pretty competitive, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And the other countries were thinking the same thing. Well, they kick it into high gear and actually made strides. The United States started throwing money at education, but that money just gets eaten up with curriculum companies and politicians and whatever else is in the way, and it doesn't get into the classroom. So we started throwing more money per pupil into our classrooms, and yet we're still at the bottom. We really are having an education crisis. So let me tell you what Beta Academy is trying to do about it. And I'll just say this right now. We are not the solution to education. We're part of the solution, but it's going to take a lot of players and a lot of people to fix the education in America. And it does start with educating ourselves and educating our communities. So how is Beta Academy combating this? Our educational philosophy, we believe in joyful rigor, high expectations, and a standard of excellence. You can see it from our rainbow painted hallways to our uniforms. Everything that we do, we try to put that stamp of excellence on it so that we are teaching our scholars. I lived in Japan for a long time, and everything they did was so perfect. I mean, you would hand them money, and then they get your change for you, and they would hand it back to you like this, just so respectful and excellent. And I'm like, that is missing in American culture, and we've got to put the stamp of excellence, because good enough isn't good enough, right? There's something about when everybody loves to go to Disneyland. Why? It's excellent. There's something about excellence that everybody stands up and pays attention. And it's really, really, really hard to get excellence, because everybody fighting for excellence is in a war. Because don't think that the teachers and the parents and the families and the scholars, why do we have to do this? Why is this important? You just kind of sometimes want to give up, right? But you have to know what that perfect picture is. I'm going to get off, but it's such an interesting thing. Someone was telling me about an article they read, and the best nurses in the world, they were trying to figure out how they were so good that everybody would check these babies, and the babies were, oh, they're fine, they're fine, they're fine. But then another nurse would come into the room and say, there's something wrong with that baby, they're about to die. And there was something wrong with the child. How did that nurse know and everyone else didn't? It's because the nurses that were the best had a picture in their mind what a healthy baby looked like. And so that's what we have to have in our mind, what healthy education and excellence looks like. Because then we'll know, wait, there's something wrong with this. We gotta step it up. All right, so what is rigor? It's a word that I keep using. Rigor really is about being challenging. Because if it's not challenging, it's not exciting, it's boring. Rigor at Beta Academy is when our scholars are engaged in what they're doing, when they take ownership over their work or project, when scholars use real-world references to guide decision making, when they're able to present ideas logically and audibly to an audience, when they can dream what they can accomplish through what they're learning, and when they exemplify courage by sharing their findings and presenting their work. Rigor is having fun, working in teams and collaborating. High expectations. So you know that whatever you set that bar to is what will be met. If you set your bar a little bit average, people will just settle in for it. Okay, this is where we are. But you set that bar, and sometimes we set these goals every single year for our teachers, and I'm like, whoa, is that goal too high? And I'm like, what am I talking about? We're gonna do it. Beta's gonna do this. And we set those goals, and it's amazing what the teachers can do with those scholars. I've got, I think one teacher here, Miss Hildebrand, your scores right now, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 100% passing rate. We just got our scores in. I mean, you set the bar high, they'll meet it. And again, we tell our families and we tell our kids, you have a job. There's one thing that's important right now, and that job is your education. So what's our secret sauce? It's nice to talk about rigor and high expectations, but you gotta have a little secret sauce in there, right? Because I really haven't hit on the joy aspect. And that was one of my main problems. School was not fun for me, and it was very hard for me to pay attention during the school day. So we have several teaching instructional methods that we use at Beta Academy. And in the primary grades, the three that we use the most are whole brain teaching. And whole brain teaching is a dynamic instructional method, and it engages multiple parts of the brain at once. So learning comes alive through discussion, movement, reasoning, rhythms, games, visuals. You can literally walk into our school and hear the excitement spilling out into the hallway. That is the standard. My elementary teachers know when I walk into that hallway, I want to hear your classes learning. They need to be engaged in their learning. Hands-on learning activities. We unleash the power of learning by doing. Moving beyond lecture and theory, we turn our classrooms into learning labs where students perform experiments, they create, they build, and they learn through trial and error. And then our character program. You know, character is so important in a time where it feels like character is not important. That's when you know it's the most important. We teach importance of living an honorable life, one bound by integrity and ethical decision making, and we instill leadership skills and respect for others for the benefit of mankind. One of our favorite things is our early act first night ceremony. And one way that we instill our character is through early act first night. So once every 6 weeks, the students are given a character trait that we will be learning. Maybe it's respect, maybe it's honor, maybe it's service. And it will be woven through the curriculum. It'll be woven through the school day. And at the end of that 6 weeks, the teacher is asked to pick one scholar that represented the character trait. And after the teacher picks that scholar, we call the families and we say, hey, we don't want you to tell anybody, but Jose is getting picked for respect. And so don't tell Jose, but we're gonna have the celebration next week and come out. So the parents bring flowers, they bring balloons, and we stick them in a room and hide them. And we bring all of the community, the Beta scholars, into the gymnasium. We roll out a red carpet, we have a castle, and we have a real certified knight. He comes out, and the teacher will get up in front of the entire school and say, the scholar that I chose for respect is Jose Alanis. And we have drums, and everyone screams, they go crazy, and they start walking down that red carpet, and the families come out behind them. And when they get to the front, we make sure that each one of our teachers has written a special accolade for that scholar. And they say, Jose, you're amazing, and I'm gonna tell you why you were picked for respect. And they read like to the hearts of those kids, and then we all cry. I'm about to cry right now. Literally, the parents cry, the teachers cry while they're reading it. We are watching it. It's so amazing and so moving, but it's one of the ways that we're building character in our scholars. I mentioned to you about the whole brain teaching, the hands-on learning, and it's really hard to describe. So I have a 1-minute video that I'd like to share with you.
For my final blank, all eyes on Zaire. All eyes on Zaire. The last final function is 125. Agree or disagree? Agree. You are fantastic. You're fantastic. Hey, hey, class, oh, class. Hey, hey, yes, oh, yes. Tracking the board. Tracking. Miss Applegate wants to buy ice cream for 78 scholars in 2nd grade. There are half a dozen bars in each box. How many boxes will she need? What is my first step in this problem? Go! Rewind.
Rewind yourself.
First, I gotta look if it's multiplication or division.
Hey, class, no class.
Hey, yes.
What will my number sentence be? Tracking, Abigail.
Tracking. Class. Yes. Heads and eyes. The number sentence will be 78 divided by 6 equals.
Agree or disagree?
Agree.
78 divided by 6. I need to find out how many boxes do I want to buy, huh? Solve your problem. Go.
Okay.
Get it out.
13 boxes. There you go, 13 boxes.
Although we use whole brain teaching and hands-on learning, and we do our character education in the upper grades, we also really our strong academic focus and the instructional methods that we use are a little bit different, but we like to use cooperative learning. And this is when scholars engage in powerful learning through collaboration and group discussion. And they give and share their ideas, they learn how to give and receive feedback. And actually, it was really hard to capture on video, and I was like, oh, there's some 7th graders here today, so I thought that maybe we would just demonstrate what that looks like. But last week or the week before, the 7th graders were reading Newfoundland. And basically, it is a realistic fiction story of Lewis and Clark's voyage to the west to discover the Northwest Passage. And in this story, it's a novel, and it's written of a collection of letters written by members of the voyage, and they all have different points of view. And also in this book, the dog has its own point of view, and the dog's name is Ulam. And there's one part in the story where the Shawnee come up and they offer to buy Ulam from Lewis. And so one of the questions as I'm walking around that one of the teachers had is they said, do Ulam and Lewis feel the same or different about the Shawnee's offer to purchase Ulam? So I'm going to repeat that again, and then I'm going to call on one of our scholars. Do Ulam and Lewis feel the same, or do they feel differently about the Shawnee's offer to purchase Ulam? Do I have a 7th grader who'd like to answer that question? I'm going to call on Diego.
The Shawnees, rewind. Ulam and Lewis's feeling differ about the Shawnees buying or trying to buy Ulam. This is because Lewis feels unpleasant while Ulam feels shocked. My evidence is on page 74 in the book Newfoundland, where it states that Lewis cannot be away from Ulam, and Ulam wants Lewis. So this explains how Ulam and Lewis have a strong relationship, which they cannot be apart. Also, on page 73 of the Newfoundland, it states that Ulam has never felt owned by Lewis, which means he's never felt as property to Lewis. While when he's thinking about the Shawnee buying him, he thinks that the Shawnee would think of him as property and not as a dog or like a pet. In conclusion, we can see that Lewis and Ulam have a strong bond because even though they have different feelings about the question that the Shawnee proposed to them, they still agree on the fact that they don't want to sell Ulam.
Thank you, Diego. Scholars, can we give them a 10-finger woo? Woo! All right, and typically in giving and receiving feedback, we're going to have a scholar stand up and critique his answer. So, young Abigail, can you critique Diego for us?
I believe that Diego's response was a well thought out response and he used his gestures and delivered it in a well manner. I will be giving him 2 scores. One score is for the information that he gave, and the second score will be for how he delivered his response. So for the first score, the information that he gave was very well thought out and well planned, and his word choice could have been used a little bit better. And when he said unpleasant, I believe it was, to me it would have made more sense if he used the term unpleased. And also, his conclusion was explained well. However, his evidence, for me, there was a part of it that didn't make much sense to me. So if he would have explained it a little bit more and drew out the evidence portion, then I feel it would have made a little bit more sense. So with all this information, I would give him a 90-point score for the information that he gave. For the way he delivered his response, I would give him a 90-point score as well, because his voice could have been projected a little bit more, and he had gestures, and his eye contact was wonderful.
Thank you, Abigail. Can we give her a catch-up cheer, class? Okay, so that's just a little example of cooperative learning, and if you work in a work environment, you know it's very hard to take feedback. We're teaching them early. You better hire these kids when they graduate. They know how to take feedback. Socratic method, another method we use. Our scholars develop the discipline of conversation and critical thinking through Socratic seminars. They practice socializing techniques such as listening without interrupting, using their name, and then also I'm losing my train of thought right now, but they learn how to not interrupt, they learn how to use each other's name, and there was something else I was going to say, but we'll just skip it because I can't remember. The last thing is interactive scholar notebooks. I'll try to run through this, but we know the power of writing things down, and all of this engagement in the classroom, when you're engaging your body and you're engaging your brain, you're more likely to remember the information, but you're 3 times more likely to remember the information after you've learned everything and you get a chance to write it down in a creative way. And we use higher order thinking through Bloom's taxonomy when we do this. And then it's also a place for them to go back and check their notes and study. So we definitely lean heavily on our interactive scholar notebooks. All right, so is this paying off? Is what Beta Academy is doing, does our secret sauce work? Do having high expectations work? I'll let you be the judge. I'll take you through some of our achievements. These are all of our STAR scores from last year. We just got our first round of STAR scores in for this year for our 5th and 8th graders, which were very high, but I don't have them in this deck because we're waiting for the whole school to be rated. But I'll just show you right here. Beta Academy is in the gold. And in the dark blue is the state, and the light blue is Houston, Pasadena school districts. So you can see in math, reading, and writing collectively where Beta Academy is performing in the city of Houston and across the state. We have that broken up a little bit better down here. 3rd grade reading, 3rd grade math, 5th grade reading, 5th grade math, 8th grade reading, 8th grade math. And again, you can see last year the 8th grade reading 100 percentile. The reading teacher is right there in the back, Miss Hildebrand. She's amazing. And then this one we're the most proud of because Beta Academy is about going into at-risk communities, and we want to provide an elite education for all children. And this is actually broken up by our subpopulation. And the blue and red bars represent Beta Academy's math and reading. So the math is the blue, and the red is the reading. And then the state is going across the middle. So the state's math is yellow, and the state reading is the green. And you can see in our African American population how much higher our students are performing. Our Hispanic population, our English language learners, our economically disadvantaged, very proud of our special education students, and then of course our overall average here at the bottom where we're performing on those subpopulations. Beta Academy was, we did make Texas Honor Roll last year. Out of 9,935 schools, only 7% made Texas Honor Roll. Beta Academy was fortunate enough to make the Honor Roll. We're very excited about. So our intended impact. We believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and Beta Academy intends to build a new school that will be a beacon of light to our community. One of the big things about being in a low-income area is that we definitely want to break, and I've already heard it in here today, but the generational chains of poverty. And poverty is not just about what's in your pocketbook. It's what's in your mind and what's in your heart. And we just recently opened 9th grade. We've been adding a grade a year, so it's our first year to have high school. And we started a tradition where myself and my 2 principals took our 9th graders out and took them to our old neighborhoods, our old apartments, and shared with them the struggles that we had. And it was such a powerful day because my principal shared with the scholars how she had a father that stood over her and said, "You'll never amount to anything, and I wish you were never born." And she shared about how her father walked out on them. And we were in front of her old house, and it was super tiny. And she was like, "This is the first thing that was ever mine." And she said, "I remember being so proud." But the thing about it is our principal could have stayed there and said, "This is as far as I'm going to get in life because my dad did me wrong. And he left us, and we don't have the money, and I'm not in the right neighborhood, and I don't have the right economic status," but she didn't, because it was about what was in here.
That's right.
And wealth mentality takes responsibility. I know my dad did me wrong. I know there were things spoken over my life. I know I grew up in this neighborhood, but that is not going to define me. Wealth mentality says, I am responsible for what I'm going to become, and I can get up and do anything that I want to do in this world. Our assistant principal told his story about wanting to take his own life and how he wished his superpower was to fly, because he wanted to fly away from his family and his life. And he shared lots of intimate stories about, what happened to him as a child. And again, looking at where he is today, and when we had a chance to debrief with those kids, they couldn't believe it. And they said, "Today, I understand what you mean." And I told them, we have several scholars here that are ambassadors, and they're chosen. They have to be 100% chosen by the administration and all of their teachers. They have to get a vote of yes, and it's very hard to get a vote of yes by everyone. And I told those kids that I'm sure a lot of you want to be ambassadors, and it's not your teacher's fault that you didn't get to be picked as an ambassador. It's not because they don't like you, and you don't have a 50 in math because they're picking on you. Who is responsible for their grades? And those kids were like, "We are." And it's about breaking poverty mentality. The other thing about poverty is it's about scarcity. There's not enough to go around, so I got to look out for me. When wealth mentality is like Mr. GLO, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you, because when I help you, I help us all. A rising tide lifts all boats. So Beta Academy does intend to open more campuses. We were recently approached by the Walton Foundation and Charter School Growth Fund. They'd like us to open new campuses. They gave us $1 million for the effort. However, my current campus, where the scores are so wonderful, our kids are in portables. Charter schools get less funding than public schools, and we do not get facilities fundings on top of that. So we took out $22 million in bonds. It's what we could afford. And for the kids to have the kind of the kind of facility that they deserve, I'm in the process of raising $6 million more. And Mr. GLO wanted me to tell you that the Brown Foundation this morning gave me a phone call, and they're gonna they will be funding $500,000 of my fundraising need. And the last thing that I'll say to wrap this up is part of breaking poverty mentality is teaching our kids to be contributors. And I told the families and I told the kids that we were spending $22 million, and before I went and asked other people for money, what are you going to contribute? And so we told them to bring their penny banks and their change, and it didn't matter how much they brought. I didn't care. I wanted them to learn how to be contributors. And I have a video to kind of wrap that up. We did a tailgate fiesta. Oh, sorry, that's a picture of our facility that we're building currently. That's it. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Let me see if I can get through this.